Okay, looks like it's time to get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining our live lecture today. My name is Isaac, and I'll be the lead instructor for the lecture. And today's topic will be career skills. So, getting started, let's go ahead and start talking about career planning. Okay, so career programmers are a lot like doctors in the way that they tend to specialize in one specific field. So, for example, oncology, cardiology, radiology, pediatrics, right? So, same thing with programmers. You've got front-end developers, back-end developers, right? The list goes on. So if you don't know what career direction you want to take right now, that's okay. You've got plenty of time to figure it out. And there's actually a technique you can use to help you figure out where you fit in based on 4 different factors. And those are strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Therefore, accumulating the acronym SWOT. Okay, so going over those in a little more detail. Example of strengths would be if you're someone who's creative, motivating, energetic, dedicated, right? Those are all good things. Whereas maybe some of your weaknesses are if you're impatient or outspoken or unrealistic, right? Those things obviously degrade your value. And then we've got things such as opportunities where this is what's available in the market right now. Like I mentioned a minute ago, front-end engineers, back-end engineers, data scientists, so on and so forth. Okay, and then finally we've got threats. So things that can get in the way of your career path to identify, such as criminal history, unemployment, finances, and that kind of thing. Okay. So moving on, let's talk about soft skills. So the vast majority of people who become programmers have several other non-technical skills that have been acquired through previous employment and education and are transferable to the programming job. Okay, so these are things like interpersonal skills, how you act with others, organizational skills, how you approach tasks, leadership skills, how you motivate and direct others, and communication skills, how you communicate with others. Okay, and so you got to think every time you apply for a position, in programming, everyone else who's applying for that position is also going to have technical skills. So you've got to add value to yourself in other ways, and oftentimes these soft skills can definitely add more value to you as a candidate. Next, let's move on. Let's talk about building your resume. Okay, and so when you're building your tech resume, there's 3 C's you should follow. And the 3 C's are, it should be clean. So that means easy to read font, proofread, and not cluttered. It should be concise, okay, not 3-4 pages long, really, to the point and related to the job position. It should be convincing. Showcase your skills, experience, but don't try to oversell it. By using maybe vocabulary you don't use in your everyday, conversations. Okay, so although the resume process is subjective, every hiring manager company has their own process. The statistics show us that there's around 7 to 10 seconds you have of viewing time by a manager before they move on to the next resume. So the most important information should be located at the top half of the resume. Okay, and the first thing you should list is your GitHub and LinkedIn profiles, okay? And then you should list your tech skills. And third, you should list your project examples. So let's take a minute to go through an example of a bad resume, and then we'll take a look at a good one. Okay, so first thing we see here with this resume is got this big, ugly blue graphic running down the side. So make sure you don't have any graphics, no images, nothing like that. It should be all text. Next, they included their GitHub profile, but they did not include a LinkedIn profile, right? And so they need to include both because some managers who are hiring, actually a lot of them are non-technical. So they can't really evaluate you based on your GitHub if they don't know how to code themselves. So it helps if you have your LinkedIn profile and they can evaluate you that way. Next, we have our skills, right? All the coding tools, frameworks, libraries, and such. Okay, and that's located in the right position because as we mentioned, this needs to be at the top half, and it is. But next, you'll notice they put education before projects. And we actually want to put projects before education. And the reason we want to do this is because although education is definitely good and adds value to you, it doesn't have as much weight as a project does because they can easily click on a link for your projects and view your project right then and there and get a real good sense of how good a developer you are versus when you say you went to a university, they really can't judge, how good of an education you got if you didn't build anything while you were there. So you always make sure you have your projects before your education. And then finally, this is way too long of a resume, right? They've got 2 pages, and the fact that we're only probably going to get half of it, viewed, we shouldn't even bother with that second page. It always should just be 1 page. Okay, let's take a moment to look at a good example of a resume. Okay, so first off, we notice that they have both their GitHub and their LinkedIn profiles. Next, they have their tech skills. And finally, they have their project examples. Okay, and you'll notice this is around the halfway point, right? Other things they include that add value are education, professional experience, and volunteering. Okay, so now we've looked at those resumes. Let's go ahead and go over 10 things never to include on your resume. The first one is misspell words or bad grammar. Okay, these days there's so many online tools like Grammarly for checking these things for you. You really have no excuse for having those things appear on your resume. Number 2, never include personal information like your social security number. Okay, you got to remember that a lot of these resumes are being sent by email, and then those emails are being printed out, and you never know who the resume is going to end up in their hands, right? So to protect yourself, don't include that information outright, and only give it to the company when they ask for it for payroll processes or whatever else. Number 3, never include jokes on your resume. Keep it strictly professional. Number 4, never include irrelevant work or job experience. Okay, some people will tell you it's better to have some experience than no experience, but in the tech industry, that's actually not true. Okay, so if the only experience you've ever had is a bit of babysitting for your aunt and uncle, go ahead and just leave that off, because it's irrelevant, and it really doesn't help your case. Number 5, never include meaningless words you don't normally use in your everyday vocabulary. Okay, these are really easy to spot because most people talk generally the same in the way that they write their resumes and the verbiage they use. And then when you get some individuals come along and use really big words that are not heard that often, it's actually a red flag to a lot of recruiters and other professionals in that field. So go ahead and just use your everyday speech, and keep it to yourself in that regard. All right, number 6, never include reasons for leaving previous positions. Although this is a common question to ask on a company application or even in an interview, it's considered a waste of space on your resume. Remember, you only have 1 page, so you want to include the stuff that's going to add value to you. Number 7, never include hobbies. Again, this really doesn't add value to you, so it's just considered a waste of space. Number 8, never include salary requirements. This comes off as you only are there for the money, and that's all you care about. And a lot of employers want to, believe you're there for a bigger picture, right? They all know you're there for the paycheck, but they want to believe you're there to actually make their company better. So, never include that. They'll ask that during the interview or on an application. Number 9, never include references. Again, this is considered another space waster. It doesn't add value to you as a candidate, so don't include it. And number 10, don't include unprofessional contact information. So if you have an email that was made 10 years ago, and it's immature or inappropriate in any way, you should change it. And that way you don't have bad first impressions and things like that. Okay, next, say you got your resume put together and you're ready to, network yourself. Okay, so there's 2 kinds of networking. You've got in-person networking and you've got online networking. And so first we're going to talk about in-person networking. And as it turns out, in-person networking is the #1 way to get a job in the tech industry. And while online networking is great, in-person networking is even more effective. And the reason why is because of something called the hidden market. And hidden market is 80% of job openings in the tech industry are not posted online. Okay, and that's the actual fact. So that means most of the companies are getting their recruits, their new employees from internal referrals. Okay, and so what you need to do is you need to put yourself out in your community and meet other developers and those individuals who do work at these companies, so you can get those kind of referrals and get access to that hidden market. Okay, and so how you can meet these individuals is through events called meetups. Okay, and meetups are typically, centered around coding, workshops, something of that nature, where, maybe the first hour there'll be a hands-on, exercises, and then, after that it'll be an hour of just, mingling and talking with, individuals or, around the room. And so a couple directories that we recommend for looking up different meetups in your area is meetup.com and eventbrite.com. Okay, next, let's go ahead and talk about finding the right fit. So it's always it's always best practice to do your research to learn about an organization before you apply for a position. And this is important for a couple of reasons. During the interview, it's good to know about the company's background because it shows you actually care about what they do and not just the paycheck. Again, like I referenced a minute ago, every employer wants to believe you're there for a bigger reason than just the money. Okay? Number two, everyone's culture is different. Although these days, culture is pretty laid back, some people prefer maybe a little bit more strict corporate environment. Maybe they're talking to customers. Everyone's different. So depending on what you want, make sure that, you research the company and make sure it matches up with your core values. So, neither you or the employer is disappointed if you do actually get hired. Now let's shift gears and talk about the online job search. Okay, so although, the in-person job search is the most effective way to get a job, the online job search is definitely valid and should not be ignored because there's definitely lots of opportunities here as well. Okay, so a couple of job boards we recommend are Indeed.com, Monster.com, Dice.com. And Craigslist, although it's not technically a job board, because it's classifieds, you will find a lot of help wanted ads for things like small websites and other stuff of that nature. So if you're looking to build up your portfolio or make some money, Craigslist tends to have smaller gigs offered on there to get you going. All right, now let's go ahead and reiterate on your contact information. Okay, so although it seems common knowledge, adjusting your email and voicemail during a job search period can make a big difference on how potential employers view you. Okay, so look at these two emails. This is an example of a good email, john.smith@gmail.com. Simple, to the point. Whereas a bad example would be johnnytheladiesman89@gmail.com, where it's kind of immature, kind of inappropriate, and it's really long, right? So you would want to change this up if you have something similar. And then your voicemail, you want to make sure it's short and to the point, nothing long and dragged out, nothing that is, joking or anything to that regard, right? It needs to be strictly professional. Okay, next, let's go ahead. And let's talk about LinkedIn. So if you don't know, LinkedIn is the world's largest networking platform for business professionals. And if you don't have a LinkedIn profile, you will need to get one to be successful in this industry. Okay, so let's take a moment to look at an example of a good LinkedIn profile. Okay, so right off the bat, let's start with the photo. You can see that this is a relatively recent photo and he is smiling, okay? And you want to make sure that you get a photo of yourself smiling because it really can add a lot of value. Next, we have the headline, which, you just tell people about what you're excited about now and the cool things you want to do in the future. Summary is this little, about me section here. Is a couple of paragraphs about, your journey so far in the business world. Experiences is like your online resume where you list out where you've worked and the periods you worked there and company description and description of your duties and links to that, organization, right? So, very, very important, very valuable. Organizations, that's pretty self-explanatory. If maybe you're in Boy Scouts of America, right, Girl Scouts, or something like that, you're a leader or help out, like you would list that in organizations. Education, right? If you have a degree from a university, educational institution, you'd list that here. Add value to yourself. Volunteer experience, if you've done something, haven't got paid for it, but it's for a bigger cause, definitely list that. Adds a lot of value to you, especially in bigger companies like Google, Facebook, right? They get so many applicants. A lot of times they'll turn to the volunteer experience to kind of weigh out the ones who are a little more, moral. Okay, next we've got skills and experience. And skills and experience, it simply allows you to list your tech skills like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, right? And you go in there and you list them out. And then you can have what's called connections, which are similar to friends. And they come in there and they can endorse you. And for each one that endorses you, it adds up your endorsements for that skill. And it basically solidifies the fact you can actually perform that given skill, okay? And so for recruiters, hiring managers, that's really valuable. Because if they see 20, 30, 40 people endorse you for a specific skill, they can have confidence bringing it in for an interview and not wasting their time. Next we have honors and awards, and this is if you've achieved anything. Go ahead and list it here, and adds value to yourself. Courses is maybe if you took a course that wasn't necessarily degree related, maybe it was a specialty or a certification in something, right? You could list that there. Projects, as software developers, you'll definitely want to list your projects here, the title of your projects, a description for the projects, collaborators, right? All that good stuff, and definitely links to those projects as well if they're hosted, so potential employers can visit them and play with them. And last, we got recommendations. Okay, so ask everyone from your instructors to your classmates to endorse you, and this is very much like skills right here, where your connections endorse you verbally instead of skill by skill, and they tell the business world why you're a great professional to work with. Next, let's look at an example of a GitHub a good GitHub profile. Okay, so this is a lot more simple than LinkedIn. First, we got a picture, and you'll notice that she is smiling. Next, we've got a good amount of repositories. You want at least over 10. Makes it look like you're active and gives them a good amount of code they can look at and view you as a developer. Okay. And then, she's got a decent amount of followers too, adds influence. And yeah, that's really it in a nutshell. This is an example of a good GitHub profile. Next, let's talk about your online branding. Okay, so in the tech-driven era, employers often look at online sources that don't have anything to do with you as a professional, but rather who you are as a person in general. So an example of good branding would be if an employer went to a social website and they found your profile and you had a high number of profile followers. That wouldn't be bad at all. That would actually be a really good thing. It shows influence and leadership. But bad example of branding would be if they went and looked at your social profile and had a big bunch of pictures of you drinking, smoking, and each and every night, you're out on the town, and it would give the wrong impression. So if you need to, go ahead and clean up your social profiles to give yourself the best fighting chance in this regard. Next, let's talk about the elevator pitch. Okay, so the elevator pitch is a technique that can be used to answer the prompt, "Tell me about yourself." Okay, so a lot of us have heard this question at a lot of interviews. It's oftentimes used as an icebreaker to get the interview started. And a lot of times people just kind of blurt out the things that come to the top of their head. Normally, my name is this, I live or grew up here, my hobbies are this, and I want to work here because of this, right? So no, most of the time we don't sound very confident in our answers. They don't sound very thought through, and they don't really add value to us when we answer that question. But if we prepare an elevator pitch, we can actually answer it more confidently and come off more prepared than other candidates. Okay, so elevator pitch is structured like this. We've got a 30 to 60 second time span where you don't want it to be too short, but you don't want it to drag on and be too long. And then you need to list 3 things. You need to list what you do well, that's your skills, what you want to do, that's your goals, and why you want to do it. And if you can sum up those 3 things in that specific structure, you are definitely going to add a lot of value to yourself in that interview, answering that prompt. All right, so moving on to the subject of the tech interview, let's go ahead and talk about ways you can prepare for it. Okay, so they come in all shapes and sizes. There's no one secret technique to passing a tech interview. All employers and organizations, they all kind of do things their own way. So knowing that, it's best just to prepare using, well-known scenarios. That way you can, give yourself the best fighting chance in preparation. Okay, so here's a few sites we recommend to practice your tech interview skills. The first one being Coderbyte.com. And Coderbyte.com is really nice because they have questions that range from beginner to medium to hard, and then they give you a level, and you can actually see your level increasing over time. And a lot of these questions are very, very similar to what you're going to be getting in a tech interview. So it kind of gets your mind in that kind of mode, and it gives you a daily platform to use, so you can constantly improve and not just do it a little at a time. Next, you got codefights.com, and codefights.com is really great for learning to think on your feet, because you have to build another concept against a different developer in a timed environment. And a lot of us during interviews, we tend to go blank because we're put under pressure and we're not used to that. And so using something like CodeFights can really help you learn to work under pressure in that way. And then we got interviewcake.com, and interviewcake.com is really infamous for its ability to take developers and teach them how to answer questions in a methodical way, to where even if you necessarily don't get the answer for the question right, you technically can still get credit or partial credit for that question because of the way you approached it or the way you tried to answer it. So yeah, it's very good at just showing you tricks of the trade and interview techniques in that way. Okay, so let's wrap up with the topic of follow-up. So as in most industries, it's good to follow up with the hiring managers on your submitted applications as well as your previous interviews. Keep in mind that the hiring managers are oftentimes cycling through tons of applications, so it helps to have someone reach out to them to make yourself more memorable. And this is absolutely true. We just had a student, not even like a couple months ago, to where they had an interview, and they got told after the interview that they were not accepted for the position. So a couple of days later, they sent a follow-up email to the hiring manager just to thank them for the interview. And because they did that, the hiring manager actually brought them in, and they ended up hiring them. Okay, so if you can imagine, if that individual had not emailed the hiring manager, what might have not happened. So even if you think you blew the interview, even if you think someone else got the position, still follow up, because you just never know how much that little bit of initiative can really go a long way. Okay, so let's go and open up the floor, and let's see if anyone has any questions. So the floor is open. If you have questions, feel free to ask those now. Okay, I don't hear anyone, so I'm assuming we are all good. All right, well, thank you everyone for stopping by. Have a great day, and happy job hunting out there.